I've been talking for 30 years and writing for 30 years. There are very few people control the world. Very few people. People will be staggered how few. You can't say this, you can't say that, you must say that. Anyone that wants to silence people rather than argue their case can't have much confidence in their own case, surely. And once you go down this road of giving authority the right to decide what can be said, what opinions can be had, you are in a tyranny. What is freedom of speech? It's the freedom to speak. So I read a politician today saying, I agree with freedom of speech, but there are limits. Well, there's no freedom of speech then. Freedom of speech is the freedom to speak. If anyone's not allowed to speak, then it's not freedom of speech, it's freedom to conform to certain parameters of what are acceptable. And then what that's doing is giving power to some authority to decide what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And as we see, and we're seeing it massively now, once you give that power to an authority, it then starts interpreting what can and cannot be said in a way that squeezes and squeezes and squeezes more and more of what cannot be said. This is what political correctness is about. What is political correctness? It's simply manipulating the target population to silence itself, so those in authority don't have to. It's ridiculous. What I'm saying here is, if you look at what this progressive mentality is doing in silencing people and deciding in their arrogance what people can and cannot say and what opinion they can and cannot have, and it's this self-deluded arrogance which goes like this: I am right, therefore anyone who says something different must therefore be wrong, and by definition, because they are wrong and I am right, their freedom of speech to be wrong doesn't need to be taken into account. That's how the mentality goes. Humanity has been hoaxed on a monumental scale in relation to freedom of expression and freedom of information. And it's been done out of an area that I call the playground. It's better known as Silicon Valley. What's happened is, when you do the research, intelligence organizations like the CIA in the United States, the National Security Agency, and the Pentagon, through an organization called DARPA, the technological development arm of the Pentagon, they began seed funding technology and companies to develop what has become now known as the internet, and an outgrowth of that, what became known as social media, and the search engine technology, which eventually became known as Google. All those were seed funded by this military intelligence network. And when they were selling it, because you can't show something's real face at the start, otherwise people will reject it and it won't get anywhere. You have to put another face to the world. So it was Google. Oh yeah, Google, yeah, and we just got a search engine, we can find what we like, that's great. Hey. And social media, oh, you post to your friends, you can say what you like, there's no censorship, isn't it great? And then it builds, and then it builds, and then it builds, and now you've reached a point now with Facebook where it claims 2.2 billion active users in a global population of 7.5 billion. You have this 90% monopoly on search engines, searches of Google. Then they started saying, okay, now we've got this much control, we're going to start deciding what you see and what you don't see. We have a concentration of power in Silicon Valley, a very small area of the world, that is the greatest concentration of surveillance and censorship power the world has ever seen. They can decide what you see and what you don't see, and they can trawl your data. In other words, the military intelligence community can, to find out the fine detail of your life from the information that you've posted on these various platforms. So that's what we're facing in terms of freedom of speech. It's disappearing. In fact, it doesn't exist. There is no freedom of speech. By the definition of freedom of speech is the freedom to speak your opinion and not have it censored and not have it banned.